Hi there, my name is Mitch Wilder with themoat.com. If today's your first time joining us, welcome. And in today's video, we're going to talk about the 5 stages of paid advertising. Now, these are the stages that all advertisers go through if they want to go from either inactivity, not using a platform, or inconsistency, all the way to consistency and scale. And when you understand these stages that we're going to talk about, what it's going to help you to do is it's going to help you to do the right things in the stage that you're at to move to the next stage. And the way that we discovered these stages was for over 10 years, I ran a digital advertising agency that specialized in scaling ad spend, particularly on the Facebook and the Instagram platform, and then expanded to other platforms towards the end of my time running the agency. And what we discovered was in our process before we would take on a client, especially because it wasn't just like we were setting up ads for them, right? We were scaling up the ads sometimes to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars per month on the platform. And what we discovered was in our sales process, we had to make sure that we could actually scale the accounts that we were looking at. And so before we would take on a new client, we would request viewership access to their accounts, and we would do an analysis and an audit to see what was going on in the account. And over the course of my career, we did thousands of these. At the peak of the agency, we had access to over 3,000 ad accounts, right? Now, I didn't personally look in all of those ad accounts, but the process that we did this in was well established. And so what we would do is we would look at the account, and one of the metrics we would look at was their spend over the lifetime of the account. And after looking at enough of these, we discovered that there was pretty much the same pattern in all of these accounts. In an account that had reached full maturity of scale, or had reached the point of scale and wanted to scale further, all of these things were present and seen in the account, the things I'm about to share with you to identify the stage that they were in. And over time, what we realized is we could identify the pattern of spend, and the pattern of spend told us what stage they were in. And based on knowing what stage they were in, we knew what they needed to do next to move to the next stage. And the pattern continued. And the only thing that was not visible on the chart itself in these patterns was the 5th stage of expansion. And so we're going to go through all of the stages, and I'm going to tell you what things need to be done at each stage. And I'm also going to share with you a little bit of the science of why we figured that this worked. And I'm going to give you an illustration that you're probably familiar with, something you've probably done in your life to understand where we're coming from with that and how we got to that point. And so to start, let's talk about the stages. And so if you imagine that this is an advertising platform, and this amount is the spend, and this line or this axis here determines the time, right? And what we would see is that somebody would set up these accounts, these ad accounts, and there would be a period here of inactivity, right? So if they had a Facebook account, they would have a period of inactivity here where just no ads ran. Like they had the account, but they never used it. Maybe they set it up and intended to use it, but there was just a period of time where they obviously didn't start running ads that same day. They were trying to figure out, what needed to be done. And so this first stage where there's nothing there, we simply called it inactivity. And inactivity happened when somebody had never spent on an advertising platform before. And there's really obviously not much going on the platform because they're not advertising on it. But it's still important to identify the stage because they need to know, and you need to know if you're in this stage, right? Like if you've been thinking about Facebook ads or YouTube ads or something like that, you need to know what to do in order to be able to run successful Facebook ads or YouTube ads or whatever platform you've selected. And so really the thing about this stage is, one, you need to know, is this platform the right platform for me to be using to advertise my business, right? The other thing you need to know is, does it make sense to me that this is going to work for my business? A lot of times people will try a platform or be drawn to a platform not because they can see it working, but ultimately because they've heard that they should be using it. And really, that's not a good reason to start. And usually, you won't get very far into the next stage because you're unsure of how this is going to work for your business. Like, you can't visualize it. And I'm not saying you have to know how everything works or how to set it up. What you should know is you should know and understand how somebody goes from seeing an ad on this platform and the process of them being a customer. And that linear path of how that's going to work should make sense to you before you start advertising on the platform that you've selected. And if you can't see that, then you should really be hesitant about starting on that platform. So this first stage, nothing is going on, but it's actually very, very important because you need to be doing the right things in your business. And some of the right things, aside from what we've talked about with, um, you know, really just understanding, is this the right platform for me? Some of the things are things like doing some market research, right? Making sure that you have the right people on your team to help with using this platform and making sure you have the right resources. Setting up marketing assets like content and offers, right? All those things are important to do at this stage, and including things like checking that your website is compliant with the policies of this advertising platform, and setting up, funnels and landing pages to help you to get results when you do start advertising. So those are the things that you're doing in this inactivity stage before you actually start advertising on a platform. And it's important because you have to have those things done before you move into the next stage, which unfortunately is the most frustrating stage. And we call this stage inconsistency. And in the inconsistency stage, the ad spend within the account looks like this. And it's basically characterized by some money being spent for a period of time. Maybe I would say probably the most common time frame that I would see would be money being spent on ads for like a week and a half to 2 weeks would probably be the length of time that it was being spent. And then you would see a break where there was no spend, right? And then that would typically be a few weeks, right? 2 to 4 weeks. And then you would see another period of spend, the ads turned off again, another period of spend, ads turned off again. And basically, this is characterized by ads being turned on and off. And the reason that the ads are being turned on and off is because you did the setup that you thought was necessary in the inactivity stage. And then you thought, okay, great, we're going to start running this. And you started paying for advertising. And you didn't know what you didn't know yet. So, you may not have realized that your offer may not work as well as you hoped it would. And it's just, you spend some money, you get to a threshold where you're not comfortable spending anymore because it's not generating enough traffic, leads, or sales, or it's not generating those results at the cost that you need it to. And so the ads are not profitable. And the majority of people who move from the inactivity stage to the inconsistency stage, really stop at this point, right? You're spending the most amount of time trying to figure out what works, and you're also spending money, which is frustrating because you want that money to bring results. And if you're spending money, you really probably and wanting to advertise, really probably need it to get results, right? And it's not getting results. And this is where most people quit. And if you've ever heard somebody say, like, hey, I tried advertising on this platform, or if you've ever said it yourself, Facebook, Google, Instagram, whatever it is, and it didn't get results, you didn't move to the next stage. You were in the inconsistency stage and you quit at some point in the inconsistency stage. And unfortunately, with the inconsistency stage, uh, you can't bypass it. You can't avoid it. You have to go through it. And when everybody's at this stage, what they tend to think about is they tend to think that the issue is with the platform. It's right, the platform doesn't work. It's the audience targeting, all these different things. And while that's true, some of those things can contribute to it. What's actually more likely to be the case is that you didn't have the right offer, or you didn't have an offer that's appealing to your market, and or that you didn't communicate it clearly with your ad copy and creative of what they're getting, or the process itself was a little off. So the things that are typically the problem that create the inconsistency is one of those things, and you're not thinking it's those things, you're thinking it's the audience or the ad platform, right? Maybe I chose the wrong one. And the thing that you need to know, for some reason, just knowing that everybody has to go through this stage helps. However, the key to this stage is knowing that if you're doing the right things in this stage, everybody has to go through it, but you can accelerate the speed at which you go through it. And you can really minimize it and make it so that, maybe you only spend a week or 2 weeks in this stage and more quickly understand what's working and what's not. And by doing that, by spending less time in this stage, you're actually going to save a lot of money. And by doing the right things and focusing on this, you're going to make sure that the energy that you exerted into getting this platform set up and figuring out what works is not wasted, right? Because you've exerted a lot of energy into this and using this platform to this point. And if you quit, then that energy was wasted, right? And the money was wasted. And so it's really, really important to push through. Now, the next stage is a really highly desirable stage, and it's one that few people make it to. And we call this stage, I'm going to erase that here. We call this stage consistency. And consistency is awesome because with consistency, you might have short periods of time where your ads are turned off, right? However, for the most part, your ads are running and they're not being, if they are turned off, they're not being turned off because they're not working. They're maybe being turned off because something was miscalculated, something has to be rebuilt or restructured. You had a transition between two offers, right? There's a lot of reasons why it may be turned off. Could be a billing error, anything like that. But the point is that ads are running more often than not. And they're at the very least breaking even. You're not losing money. They're either breaking even or ideally profitable, right? To where it makes sense that maybe you're not generating money from it right away, but over time, you know that you're generating more leads, which over time of follow up and building up your list is going to help you to get business from that. So it has the benefit. Now you're not spending a lot. A lot of times people in this stage are maybe spending between $25 to $100 a day, $250 a day on average. Depends on the type of business, but really that's what consistency looks like. And the benefit of consistency really is like consistent pressure on the market, staying in front of the market, staying top of mind, consistently generating traffic, leads, and sales, right? From a method that's not exchanging as much of your time as if you were to go out and do this yourself. And so really this is a highly, highly desirable stage, and it's one that few people make it to. And what's funny about this stage, unlike the last stage, in the inconsistency stage, remember we talked about most people think that the issue is with the audiences or the ad platform itself. And while some of those things can contribute, really the main issue is usually like the offers or the copy or the process, something off of the platform like your funnel that needs to be adjusted and adapted to better connect your business to the market. And in this stage, a lot of times what will happen is because you got to this stage and you look back at your past experiences, when you start to see things go up and down in results, you tend to start messing with the offer, the copy, and the funnel again. And because that's, in the past, that was the problem. But what's funny is to get to the consistency stage, you set things up, you may have kind of duct taped some things together, and you have it working. But the thing is that it's not working as well as it should. And what's funny about this is you may think, oh, well, if it's not working, it's those offers, it's the copy, I need to split test, I need to do all these other things. But actually, in this case, a lot of it is organization and structure. You have things working, but you may not know exactly why they're working. And so you're hesitant to make certain changes. And sometimes if you do make changes, you may revert back into the inconsistency stage. And because you didn't know why these were successful, you you may go back and turn them on, but because you didn't know why they were successful, you may struggle to get back into the consistency stage. And what it really is here is it comes down to structuring the campaigns right, organizing them, getting a process of what do these campaigns look like and why are they successful, right? If I have these audiences versus these audiences, are they typically more successful? Which of my offers convert best? Which campaign objectives or campaign groups am I using, right? All these different things that happen in this part, it's a desirable part to be in, but you're not 100% sure of how you got there. And so to get to the next stage of scale, you really just need to clean up the account and you need to weed out the garden and pluck out the things that are not working and do more of the things that are working. And it's really, really important to know why the ads are working in this stage. And what will happen is people will try to jump from inconsistency to scale or consistency to scale without knowing why things are working. And that's dangerous. And so you really need to focus on strategy, on frameworks, on making sure that you know why it's working in order to be able to move into the next stage, which is scale. And so the fourth stage, being scale, is characterized by profitably spending more week over week, month over month. And it's not going to be just like straight up. It's going to be periods of like spending, cleaning things up a little bit, spending more, stopping to clean things up a little bit, and finding really the ceiling of where you're comfortable with things. And ultimately, this is the most desirable stage of using an ad platform, simply because at this point you are generating traffic, leads, and sales at scale, which means that your business is growing to facilitate it. Now, scaling is really interesting because you would think that if you found what's working and you knew why it was working, that you could just scale. But what happens is a lot of people will start getting stuck at certain points in ad spend. And instead of being able to scale, as a result, they go back down into and revert back into the consistency or inconsistency stage. And what needs to happen at the scale stage is you may think, okay, well, in this stage, it was structure and organization and audiences, and it had to do more with the platform itself to stay consistent. And at this stage, it had to do with the offer and the copy. So maybe I need more offers and more copy or more funnels and more audiences and all these different things in order to be able to scale. And what's funny about it is for scale, it actually has much less to do with the platform and the offer and the funnel than it does your business. So for example, a service-based business is going to have a much harder time scaling than a product-based business because the products can be more easily fulfilled where the services have to have time to fulfill those. If you're selling services to different industries, you may have a longer selling cycle. And all of these things in the business itself will affect how quickly you can scale and also to what extent you can scale, right? If you have a 6 month selling cycle and it takes 6 months for a lead to convert into a sale, well, then it's going to be a much slower scaling process than if you have a 7 day selling cycle where that's how long it takes new leads to convert into new customers. So those are things that you need to know. And if you were to scale too quickly, you would actually do damage to the business. So really, at the scaling stage, it has everything to do with the business itself. And the strategies and the formulas and the frameworks that you set up in the consistency stage are simply laying the foundation that facilitates that scale. And so if you can't scale, it could be something that those strategies are holding you back from scaling. But in most cases, it's something in the business that's holding back the scaling that's really unseen. And so we've gone through the 4 stages. We have the first stage, which is inactivity. We have the second stage, which is inconsistency. We have the third stage, which is consistency. And then we have the fourth stage, which is scale. And like I said, the fifth stage is unseen. But you could look at it this way. Like if you have investment accounts and investment assets and holdings, you may have somebody managing those for you. You may have somebody managing or helping to manage your portfolio. And there's an old saying about putting all your eggs in one basket, right? It's risky. So by that reason, like somebody wouldn't put all of their money invested into one stock, right? They would spread it out across multiple companies. And with paid advertising, well, if we go back to our illustration for a second, with investments, when uh, when you become overly invested in certain assets, the asset manager uh, may make a recommendation or help you to reallocate some of those funds and some of those profits and help you to redistribute some of that money so that you're not overly invested in something. And the fifth stage of this process is really us doing the same thing. And it's helping us to not put all of our eggs in one basket and not become overly dependent on a single advertising platform. And so, what the fifth stage is the fifth stage is expansion. And when you expand, you're looking at the next platform that you want to be going through this process in and advertising and scaling. And you may be allocating some of your budget from scale, and you're going to start basically with the fifth stage. You're going to take some of your advertising budget and you're going to go to a new platform and you're going to start out at the beginning. Now, the reason that we don't want to do this early on and expand and start using multiple platforms is because, like we said at the beginning, if you see how it's going to work and you see that you can get business from it, it's going to be best if you focus your energy on making things work on one platform. And if you go from scale, wait till you get to scale and you have the profitability, and then you reallocate some of that budget to another platform, then you are going to have to go through each of the stages again because that platform is unique and different. However, when you go through this in the expansion period, one, there's not as much pressure that it has to work. And two, you already have the assets in place to make it work, right? You have the company set up to be able to advertise on these advertising platforms. So you may have a little bit of work that you have to do. You may have to make some refinements, but ultimately the systems are already in place. You're going to have some inconsistency as you or your team learn how to use that platform and learn some of the nuances of that platform, right? The offer that worked and the funnels that worked on one platform may not work as well on the other, or there have to be some changes to make them compliant. But and the user behavior on that platform may be a little bit different. So you will go through the inconsistency stage, but it will be accelerated. And then cleaning up the account, structuring, and scaling is all going to come much easier and faster than if you were simultaneously trying to set up ads on multiple platforms at once. And so these are the steps. Now, I had mentioned that I was going to give you an illustration about why this works. And I think that this illustration is important to understanding this process. And so let's draw out another chart here. And I want to give you an illustration um, of playing on a playground and pushing the merry-go-round, if you've ever played on one of those. Now, when I was a kid, we had a merry-go-round, and if you've never been on one, it's just a big, circular disc, and all your friends get in it, and they hold on to the bars, and somebody pushes everybody around. Now, when I was on the playground, I was always kind of a small kid. I obviously don't have that problem anymore. I was always a really small kid, really, short, light. And so when it came my turn to push the merry-go-round, I would just really have to lean into it. And as a result of before we started pushing, I would really have to lean into it. And so once my friends got on the merry-go-round, and I would start pushing, I would be putting in the maximum amount of effort. And unfortunately, the merry-go-round would just barely be moving. And so I was putting in the maximum amount of results for the least amount of reward. And the curve on this kind of goes like this. We see a similar pattern to our scaling. So in the beginning, I'm putting all my might into it and it's barely moving, right? I'm really putting my shoulder into it. It's barely moving. But then as I start getting some momentum, I'm able to kind of walk with it and put in a little bit less effort. And that's kind of like right here. And then I would get to a point where the merry-go-round itself really picked up momentum and I was able to run with it. And then there was this tipping point in the process when it would gain so much momentum that I couldn't even run and keep up with it. And at that stage, pretty much all I had to do was I could stand in one spot and I could just hit the bars on the merry-go-round with my hand and keep it at its maximum speed, right? Because of that momentum. And I was putting in the least amount of effort at that point. Now you can see with our illustration here of these spending patterns that essentially the same thing is happening. In the beginning, you're putting in the maximum amount of effort to get little or no results. You're getting some results. This is kind of like walking with the merry-go-round because you have a little bit of momentum and you have a little bit of feedback of what works. But where most people quit, right in here somewhere, is they've put in and invested the maximum amount of effort. And if they quit, they'll never get the outcome that they want. Then they get into the stage where they're getting some consistency. You're still putting in a lot of effort, but that's kind of like the point where you're running with it, right? And then the magic happens when you start to scale. And when you start to scale, as far as the advertising platform goes, you are putting in the least amount of effort for the maximum amount of results. And ultimately, that's the point you want to get to because it's only at scale. And when you get to that point, that you actually get the return on investment for all the time, energy, and money that you've spent on the platform. So understanding how this works, why this works this way, and what the stages are and what things you need to do in each of these stages is really going to be one of the most helpful things to help you to move through the stages and ultimately go from no advertising or inconsistency, if you're at those stages, all the way to consistency and scale so that you're getting the most return on your time and money that you've invested in these platforms.